Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by Orlando Homes Express, brokered by eXp Realty, proudly serving Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties. Call 407-790-9957 or visit WeSellOrlando.net. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. It is a full house on our first show of the new year. Part of blackandgoldbanneret.com. What a huge show we have for you as we wrap up the UCF football season, a disappointing conclusion in the Fiesta Bowl, and we look ahead to the future for UCF football and what happens after this. We do, like I said, we've got a full house here on the podcast. Eric Lopez is here. Jeremy Brener is here. Luke Sarris is here. Chris Carter is here. There's five of us, so I have to play the part of traffic cop today. It's going to be crazy. Murph would be here, but he's on a plane heading back from Arizona right now. So
he's still recovering. This is his first loss he's had to cover since he's joined the.
I know. This is just to give you an idea, this is the first loss that UCF has had since my daughter was in the womb, just to give you an idea. She's 14 months old. So we are blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are SB Nation's home for UCF sports. You can follow us there and on Facebook at facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. And, of course, on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. You can follow our podcast, subscribe to it if you don't already on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and tune in. All right, fellas, let's dive right in. Not the result we were hoping for. It was the result that probably a few people were thinking might be possible, but it doesn't make it hurt any less as UCF falls to LSU in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. I almost said the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. Old habits die hard. On New Year's Day, 40-32 in Glendale, Arizona. And we got to give due credit to LSU. They were outstanding, took advantage of UCF's mistakes. What hurts the most is that the Knights had a 14-3 lead at one point in the game. The defense kept everybody in the ball game, really. The Knights did score late and get a 2-point conversion to get within one possession, and they had the ball in the final minute with a chance to tie. Now, the end result was an interception, but nonetheless, UCF comes up short to LSU, their first loss since mid-December of 2016, 25 wins in a row. The streak comes to an 745 days since the last UCF loss. And I wanted to start with this, guys. And Eric, we'll start with you. The LSU out first down to UCF 32-17, nearly double the first downs. It was triple the net passing yards, more than double total offensive yards. Forced UCF to punt twice as many times. Forced 2 turnovers, had 5 sacks compared to UCF's 2, had a 3-1 time of possession advantage on UCF, and yet, UCF still had a chance to tie the game at the end. Now, I know you told me on Twitter earlier that, it was a little bit of a reach, but
yeah, it's a big reach.
I don't think it's as big a reach as people think, but I want to get your impressions of the game first. Go ahead.
Well, I think the 8 points misleading. If LSU was better in the red zone, honestly, we were fortunate to be in the game.
LSU was 4 for 5 in the red zone.
In field goals, yeah, a lot of field goals. I mean, that's great, but I mean, that kept UCF in the game, and that's been LSU's problem all year. They've settled for field goals. If you look at their kicker stat, one of the reasons one of the top kickers, he kicks a lot of field goals. It's disappointing. What's disappointing is you mentioned they were up 14-3. They had momentum early, and yet you have a stupid penalty for no reason. There's no reason to spike a football after you make a play on the field in front of a ref. Where you're just asking for a call there. And that turned the momentum a little bit around. Give credit to our guy we had on last episode from LSU who said that LSU would open it up, and they did. I'm shocked that Joe Burrow – I'm not surprised LSU won. I'm surprised how they won in that Joe Burrow threw the football, and LSU's basically threw all over UCF's strength, which is the secondary.
Yeah, he was excellent. Let's give Burrow some credit. He was, we thought that was the weakness for LSU coming in, and that kid stepped up to the plate, 21-34 for 394, 4 touchdowns, and the 1 interception, which was taken back for a touchdown by Bam Moore that gave UCF the 14-3 lead. And we were thinking at that point, oh my gosh, this might happen. But then you're right. The penalty after the third down sack, which was an absolute killer because it negated the third down. It negated what would have been a punting situation and gave LSU a fresh set of downs. They score. It's a different ballgame.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was. And the offensive line, and this was a game in the trenches. The offensive line gave Burrow time to throw. The LSU defensive line dominated the UCF offensive line. Mac didn't have a lot of time to throw. They disrupted a lot of things. Dave Aranda called up blitzes because basically he literally had no secondary whatsoever. Basically, he's playing wide receivers playing in the secondary. And UCF was unable to convert that for various reasons. So, and yet, when UCF had opportunities, they couldn't take advantage. I mean, think back to the muff punt. When LSU muffed the punt, UCF could convert, had 2 drops. I mean, it's funny. I mean,
uncharacteristic drops too, by the way, by Gabe Davis.
And that's why I'm surprised at how much negativity, and I guess it comes with the position. And maybe it's a UCF tradition when they lose, they blame the quarterback, because that's what happened the last time we lost a game. They blamed the quarterback, right? Mackenzie Miller, which turned out to have a pretty good career after that. So let's remind people that for those that are trying to hey, we need a new quarterback. I didn't think Darryl Mack got help. I mean, we already know. We all know the Gabe Davis drop, easy drop that he had. But that possession that I mentioned after the punt, I mean, there was 2 drops right there in that possession, and if those guys catch the football, Mack has a different game, and I think it's a different game. So it's just a lot of things that didn't go well. I thought Mack didn't get help from the line. I didn't think he got help from the play calling, and I didn't think he got help from the receivers. And give LSU credit, they won the game the old-fashioned way. For all this stuff with gimmicks about spreads and up-tempo, LSU won it the old-school way, and that's line up, and let's beat you up front in the trenches, and I'm going to block you, and I'm going to go after a quarterback. And LSU made enough plays, and really UCF was fortunate in that LSU didn't put them away, because I thought in late third quarter that thing was about to get away, and it didn't. So it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but it's certainly one that I think some of those players are going to have some sleep, and even some of the coaching staff will have some sleepless nights of kind of, man, we really didn't take advantage of some opportunities that we had there.
Jeremy, you were there with Brian. Brian's on a plane right now, so but you were there in the press box. You saw this game up close and personal. What did it look like on your end? Because I mean, when you're there, obviously it's a different set of eyes than when you're watching on television. Did it seem that LSU was as dominant in this game as it may have looked at times on television?
Honestly, I think LSU dominated in the trenches. I think LSU dominated in the coaching. And I think those were the 2 huge parts of the game where LSU had a total advantage over UCF. If you look at the big thing for me is time of possession. It's very, very, very difficult to win a game when you only had the ball for 15 minutes and the other team has the ball for 45 minutes. The fact that UCF came within a possession was shocking to me. And yes, we can say, oh, well, if Gabe Davis caught that touchdown, and then it's maybe maybe it's a 5-point game instead, because eventually UCF recovered the muff punt, and it led to a field goal. So they only really lost 4 points out of that.
Right.
And if they were to score there, they probably don't go for 2 at the end of the game. So it's maybe a 4-point game. They may have gotten 3 more points off of that. So I mean, you can look at those things, but I honestly think that this game was won because LSU executed their game plan to perfection. They knew that UCF could score very quick drives. That first drive of the game where it was like a 1-minute 38-second drive where Greg McCrae runs in for a touchdown.
Right.
They knew that could happen. And that's partially why UCF was still kind of in the game. I mean, they scored 25 points off of 15 minutes of play. That's still very impressive. It's the most points that LSU's given up all year long. And then also in the coaching, play calling, very conservative, especially on defense. And I didn't like that Randy Shannon kept playing man. I thought that maybe in the second half he would have, made those adjustments that he's so famous for this season, where, he made that adjustment against Memphis to win that game and in the conference championship as well. And I was kind of thinking okay, at halftime is a 3-point game, UCF, Murph and I were talking about it during halftime. We thought it was a terrible first half of football. It was no action whatsoever.
Yeah, it was very sloppy too.
Very sloppy, but look, UCF, and then they had the ball. UCF had the game, and then they just looked lethargic coming out of the second half. And I was like, this is not the second half nights that we're so used to seeing. Yeah. And I think that we were just waiting for the time to happen, and you're just waiting for the nights to finally get it clicking. And then the time just got away from them because LSU just kept on running the ball, first down, Brissett carries, first down, and then time just got out of UCF's hands. And I wish that, and then LSU had so many plays where it was 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, and they converted because the corners were playing so soft on the receivers. Yeah. All you would do is curl route, boom, to Jefferson, boom, curl route. Jamar Chase would get the ball. I mean, it was so simple. And then you get the screen pass from the tight end, and it's just or the tight end forces a screen, slant pass, first down. It was every single play. The Knights, they knew what was happening. They couldn't stop it. They weren't doing anything about it. It was just kind of disappointing a little bit to see that they knew what was going on, but never really did anything about it.
Yeah. You know what was the part that really hurt was after the Gabe Davis touchdown at the end of the first half, UCF got the ball right after halftime. And that's, and you're down 24-21. That's the chance you have to get the to sort of extend that momentum, and then you take the lead. It's a different complexion of a ball game after that. But they went 3 and out. Killins had 7, Killins had 1, and then the incomplete pass to Otis Anderson, where he was clearly interfered with, but they didn't call it on that one. And then LSU just went right down and scored a touchdown. Then the next possession, again, 3 and out, and then LSU long drive touchdown, and you're down, and now you've given up those 2 scores, and you're down 2 scores. That was, I think, the sequence that really hurt UCF in the third quarter. Chris, you were watching from north of the border. It was a difficult third quarter from what we saw, but what did you see on your end? I mean, you've been down there on the field for these kinds of moments. You know what it takes. What is it that UCF was missing in this game that put them on the short end by 1 possession?
Well, I'd have to agree with Jeremy. Really, coaching, I thought, was very poor on our end. A lot of times these games are about momentum. Momentum can be a huge factor in these games. I thought there was 3 crucial points in the game for UCF. Obviously, the first one was they were up 14-3. They had the two penalties that extended LSU's drives that ultimately gave them a touchdown. I thought as you mentioned, coming out of the second half, they just scored a touchdown at the end of the first half. They come out, the pass interference penalty that was not called, that they're 3 and out and the momentum's gone. And finally, the dropped easy touchdown that was dropped by Gabe, and the one in the end zone that was also a potential touchdown that Gabe probably could have had but didn't get. I thought those are huge factors in the game. But this is honestly the first time in Josh Heupel's career that I really thought he was really outcoached by a great extent. I said going into the game that UCF has to establish the run game to give us a time of possession, and ultimately we never did until the second half, which by then it was too late. They didn't give Darrell Mack. I mean, it was crucial for two points. They had to give Darrell Mack even that half a second or a second for the defensive line to pause so that he would have time to throw. Like I said, we had so little run game established. They were just coming, ears pinned. And for a guy in his third start, that's never going to work out well. I don't care how many guys are open downfield. If your guy doesn't have time to even blink after coming out of the center, you're not going to complete anything. But I thought that Heupel should have recognized that going into the game, first of all, because he played LSU last year when he was at Missouri. He knew what kind of talent they had on their team. He knew what kind of problem they would be. And there was never any kind of, I thought we would see at least max protection from the very beginning. It wasn't until, I think, the second half they started bringing a tight end back to help them out block, and then we started having some success. But, all in all, we just didn't have it that game. We didn't get the breaks. We made mistakes. And you're not going to, if it was an AAC team or, a G5 team, you might be able to squeak by. But when you're playing a top-tier team, whether they got their starters or not, if you don't get those breaks and you make those mistakes, at the end of the day, you're usually going to come up short. And that's what happened. We didn't have good coaching. We dropped balls we probably should have caught, and we made penalties we shouldn't have made.
You know what I thought was an interesting sort of juncture in the game was in the first quarter, okay? When Burrow threw that pick to Brandon Moore and he ran it back 93 yards, that was the 10th play of LSU's drive. So UCF scores off the pick, then LSU obviously gets the ball back, and then they go another 11 plays and score a touchdown. So believe it, even though UCF got the points off the pick and got the momentum off of that pick six, that's 24 consecutive plays that your defense is out on the field. And
that was also the drive that we extended twice with penalties.
Right.
It's a backbreaker.
And then the next, so they scored on the first drive, UCF did, in pretty typical UCF fashion, 6 plays, 69 yards, 138. But then the offense didn't get the ball back for another almost 10 minutes of game time. And when they did, Mack fumbled the ball away at the UCF 44-yard line on basically their second offensive possession. So that was a really tough stretch where it allowed LSU to get back in the game. They took the lead 17-14, and then that was pretty much it. 3 and out the next time around, and UCF didn't establish another drive again until midway through the second quarter, when they went for it on 4th and 5, and then they turned the ball over on downs. By that time, they were down 10, 24-14. I thought
we didn't score points from that 14-3 position until the end of the half.
Right, until the touchdown pass.
We went entire almost two quarters without doing anything offensively. I mean, like nothing.
Right,
3 and outs every time.
And let's give some credit to Darrell Mack on that touchdown pass, which was really the highlight of the day, I thought, for UCF. That was an absolute dime. But you look back at his whole game's performance, he threw for under 100 yards. That was that was it. It was
a third of his yards.
Yeah. It was actually more than that, actually. So, Luke, I want to bring you in on here because you were watching from home as we were, but. What was your thought on this? Did it seem that? See, I'm of the mind that if you turn a couple plays one way or the other, this is a totally different ballgame, and UCF is right there step for step, maybe win this game. So I didn't think that the gap between UCF and LSU was all that great in terms of the end result. This I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but this didn't seem like a blowout to me, like everyone seems to think it was, where the score was closer than the game. I don't know. Am I wrong on that?
I don't know. I see it both ways. I mean, the truth of the matter is just we could not match what they brought to the table physically. And that's the truth. I mean, our offensive line just got dominated up front. There wasn't really too much to it. I think and this is not a knock on Mac, but I think when a quarterback has that little time to make a decision and to try to make a play, I think a quarterback making his third start of his career, that's going to result in a nightmare.
Yeah.
I just think physically we were outmatched.
I guess what was the difference? What was the difference then between this year against LSU and last year against Auburn? Because, I mean, you can make the case that Auburn was a physically superior team to UCF last year.
Pittman and Gerard.
Mackenzie Milton.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff, it's called motivation, okay? No. But to be honest, I wholeheartedly, although the results of the teams may not be the same, I think I watched both games and I watched them both closely, and I think the physical, just the natural physical advantages this LSU team had were superior to last year's Auburn team.
Okay.
I mean, these guys have some freakish athletes. And listen, our offensive line, they did the best they could, but Mac had no time. So, you could have had the Waterboy playing quarterback, for LSU. I'm not sure if you guys heard, but they had a wide receiver play defensive back in that game.
Because that defensive back got
defensive back for the first 2 years. So
right.
I mean, not a lot of people are talking about it. I just didn't know if you guys heard.
Yeah, and also the reason why he played was because the guy in front of him punched a guy in the face and got tossed out of the game.
Which makes it wild. I mean, this game had a little bit of everything. It was like it had a guy punch in the face. I mean, I said this on social media. The IQ level for this game was not the highest for both sides.
No. It was a sloppy game on both sides of the ball.
26 total penalties, by the way.
Yeah.
Fiesta Bowl record.
Yeah.
Not one they'll keep the tapes on, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're out here making records still. But
right.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who was playing quarterback. Mac had absolutely no time to make the passes, and he didn't have his best stuff that we saw against Memphis. We competed, we competed till the very last second we were in the game. I think that's all you can ask for. But this is a very talented team with a lot of talented players who are well coached, and we were physically outmatched, and they just played better than us, and there's really not too much else to it. Yes, you are correct. There are a few plays that if they did go a different way, it would have been a different ball game. Maybe we would have had the lead going into half, but that's the game in and of itself. Things like that will happen, and that will determine the outcome.
A quick show of voices. All right. In an alternate universe where Mackenzie Milton gets the start in this game, I'm going to go around the horn. Just give me a quick 1 or 2 word answer, especially you, Eric Lopez. If Mackenzie Milton starts this game, does UCF win it, in your opinion? Eric?
Against the shorthanded LSU team or a full roster?
Against LSU as they played in this game.
I think they probably find a way to win because you got to believe Milton, with his experience, makes some plays. I will point out, though, he doesn't block anybody.
Okay. Chris?
I think it would be night and day. I think it would be like 52-40 or even less because time of possession would be hugely different. I also think Mackenzie would probably make a few suggestions to Heupel that Darren Mack did not feel like he could. Right. So I think it'd be a drastically different game. You can't underestimate the impact of a quarterback of Mackenzie's caliber and experience. You just can't.
Jeremy?
Honestly, you could convince me, but I honestly think that it doesn't. I think that LSU makes the adjustments necessary for Mackenzie. So I'm going to go with no.
Okay. Luke?
The difference between being a Heisman vote-getting quarterback and being a quarterback making your third start is that when you're under pressure and you don't have the time to think, that's where McKenzie thrives. So he definitely would have made it a different game. Would they have won? Maybe. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it would have been a completely different offense performance for UCF. Unfortunately, McKenzie doesn't play in the defensive backfield.
Yeah.
Those two missed TDs, I guarantee, would have been made with McKenzie throwing, because he would have put them all where it was catchable.
I felt that there was that one drop that, it was called a drop on Gabe in the end zone, but it looked like Darryl threw it over the wrong shoulder. Yeah, there was one where he just missed the throw. I thought the one that really hurt was that 70. It would have been a 75-yard touchdown.
Oh, yeah.
That was a killer. Oh. And that one hurt. By the way, I went back and I looked at, you know what McKenzie Milton's third career start was?
Don't tell me.
Was it Maryland?
It was
Maryland.
It was
that was
his first.
Maryland
That was
his
his first start.
6 fumbles in his first game.
Yeah, it was his. It was the Temple game. It was the Temple game where PJ Walker threw the touchdown at the end of the game. And in that game,
that game made me sick.
Yeah, well,
that was Frost's worst coaching game.
Yeah, that was and Milton's line in that game 13 of 22 for 210 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick, and he ran for only 9 yards. So
his freshman year, I mean, he had some very bright moments, but he also had some moments where
he threw,
you weren't sure.
He threw some duds out there.
Let's not forget McKenzie Milton was booed out of the stadium at the Cure Bowl.
Yeah, and we were there. Remember that, Eric?
My favorite part of that was people started chanting for Holman, and this is no knock on Holman or McKenzie, but people started chanting for Holman, and I'm standing there, and everybody's like, Holman. And Frost is like, all right, we'll put him in. Holman goes in, first play, interception.
Yeah. I mean,
you asked for it. Yeah.
And God bless Justin Holman, who was, he was a real team player. He did not complain one iota that year.
His family did, though, very, very loudly on social media.
Well, that's his family.
That's what family's for.
Yeah, exactly. But Justin, he didn't complain aloud one bit. It's another one of those things where it's like I start getting like bad nightmares of like what if like games in the late 90s and early 2000s where it's like, if only we'd gotten this break or this break, maybe things would have gotten a little bit different. I want to switch gears a little bit while we still got you guys all here and give everyone a chance to sort of talk about the legacy of this game and sort of not the game, but the team in general. And cut past all of the schadenfreude that we're seeing on social media now. I mean, we've all seen it. Luke, you've probably seen it more than others. Which, by the way, I didn't think it was. I didn't think what you said was not innocuous. I mean, it was spot on. I've been getting it. I'm sure. Well, I don't know, Chris, if you have your notifications on, but I'm sure you've been getting it.
From opposing fans, I just try to ignore them. That's the problem. You can't read into any comments from opposing fan bases because they're just kind of after 2 years
they're opposing,
drill you no matter what.
Yeah, well they're opposing fan bases. If you lost if UCF lost the game by 1 point, it's you suck. You should have lost every game and
by the way,
fold up your program, right?
In fairness, that's college football in a nutshell. I mean, whoever loses the Alabama-Clemson national title game, especially if it's Alabama, they're going to hear about it as well. I mean, every fan base hears about it.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim Harbaugh has the 7th winningest percentage since he has arrived at Michigan, since he took over the program, and people like Jeff are bombarding him after.
I knew that was coming.
I think that's a different situation.
Well, I'm just saying the point is
nobody likes Harbaugh though.
No, it's not a matter of. I think he just can't win the big games.
He can't shake hands either.
Well, he can't win. Here's the thing where I'll give guys like Harbaugh credit. Everyone's going to say he can't win the big games until suddenly he does. It's just like Tom Osborne, right? Tom Osborne couldn't win the big game until suddenly he did. And it's just it's a lot of these games. This is what amazes me about college football, and it goes back to this game. It's remarkable to me how many games, especially now in 2018, really do kind of turn on a dime. And I keep telling this to everybody who will listen, who's not a UCF fan out there. It's like the UCF's point, the general point of the last 2 years is, guys, The college football world is a hell of a lot flatter than you think it is. And
well, Jeff, to piggyback on that, and we've talked to coaches and players, I think the difference, it used to be like 20, 30 years ago that the major programs just had better talent across the board.
Right.
That's not the case anymore. Like UCF skill position players are as good as any of the major programs. I don't think you would trade the LSU receivers for UCF's receivers, for example, and things like that. Where still the difference is in the trenches, in the line of scrimmage. That's to me the big difference, and the depth in the trenches.
Well, I would even put this to you though, Eric, and I wonder what you guys also think about this. Is it's not just teams like, say, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Alabama. Okay, you can put them aside. Those are the cream of the crop teams and let's face it, the cream of the crop conference. But take a look at the bottom half of the SEC. All right. You mean to tell me that UCF doesn't have equal or perhaps better depth and quality in the front seven on defense and the front line on offense than, say, Vanderbilt? Maybe Vanderbilt's a bad example, but
bad example.
Yeah,
but comparing them to Kansas,
right? But
I mean, Vanderbilt's there for academics; they're not there for football.
It's
okay,
like
but give me a team in the bottom third of the SEC.
Arkansas.
Okay, Arkansas.
Well, no, I mean Arkansas has been successful. They're just having a down year. You talking about consistently like towards the bottom.
Take Tennessee.
Okay, Tennessee, good example. They've had a rough go of it. Or Ole Miss, for example, of late.
They've really had to go with it.
I honestly, I think, especially in the case of Tennessee, I think it's mismanaged talent. I don't think they're not getting the talent. I just think it becomes a balance of, hey, we are this team and we have all this talent, but we don't have the coaching staff or the schemes to utilize it, versus teams like UCF where maybe we don't have the same level of talent, but the talent we do have fits our scheme perfectly, which makes us successful.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people underestimate the value of culture in a program. And when you look at a program like Tennessee, which has had a toxic culture for a while now, and you look at a program like UCF that has had the winning culture, the team culture, that it is really essential to go on a streak like this, because in every single game there are going to be defining plays where you either stick together. You look at UCF over the last 2 years, and one common thread that you even saw in the game today, even though they lost, they never gave up, they never got down, they never quit. And more often than not, I look back to the last game that we really gave away. It was the Temple game. Temple never gave up in that game. We were up, we were way up. We didn't have the culture yet, and we gave that game away to Temple 2 years ago, and they had the culture. They never gave up, no matter how bad it looked. And they won. And so oftentimes it's the culture that gives you wins in these games as opposed to losses. And that's why I think, UCF's going to be fine the next year, 2 years, 3 years. As long as we keep the culture, we'll win these close games.
So as we look back at the legacy of this streak, and Chris, I want to come back to you on this, and then Jeremy after that. When we look back on this, and I think I wrote this up earlier, since the split of Division I into FBS and FCS, back then it was 1A and 1AA, there have only been 6 schools that have had a winning streak of 25 games or longer. And now UCF is in that club. I think it's UCF, BYU, USC, Florida State, Miami, Alabama.
Yeah.
What is the legacy of this last 745 days of UCF football going forward, not just into 2019,
the
but
or the game?
I'll let touch upon both of them, because I think they're going to feed into one another in a way.
So for the game, to me, this is the one that got away, the one we could have had and got away. But I temper that with, we shouldn't honestly even been here, because when your Heisman vote getting quarterback goes down the week before conference championship game, I had my worries that we were actually going to win that game. So for Mac to get us to this game was something I didn't think was going to happen the way he played. So I wasn't really that upset because they didn't quit. So I look at it as the game that got away because, I mean, there were so many chances for us to win this game, and we just didn't seize the opportunity, each one of those.
Right.
So I temper that, but it was the one that got away. As far as the streak, it's really redefined this program. It's redefined this program. I know we had a successful season 2013, 2010, 2007. None of those championships will compare to what lasting image the streak has done for the branding. It's changed everything. It's changed the culture at UCF. It's changed the fan base. It's not that long ago. We all remember 0-12. We all remember where we were as a school, as an athletic program. Pre Danny White.
Yeah.
Just everything has changed, and it's not solely because of this streak, but this streak is like the calling card of everything that's happened at UCF with every program. It's kind of representative of where UCF is now, and I really look that's going forward. We're going to do more streaks, and it's, like I said, it's a beautiful thing to be a part of, even just as a fan.
Jeremy, you were there. You talked to the players after the game. Did you get the sense that they thought the same thing that Chris was talking about, that dadgummit, this is one that got away, and this is going to stick in our craw the next 8 months?
I was walking into the locker room, and to walk into the locker room for a team that doesn't know how to lose, and they lost, very odd. It was like an eerie kind of mood. There were some players, tears were shed for several players. There were, a lot of people were just down, and a lot of people were just kind of like, hey man, it happened the way it did. But honestly, I think I'll be honest here. If the streak was going to end, I think we can all agree that it had to end at some point. I'm glad that it ended on a game like this. I'm glad we didn't lose at home, because then you could say, oh well, we should have won at home. I'm glad it didn't happen on the road, because then they would have looked even worse on the road. It happened in the last game of the season, so they won't have to readjust. It happened when they were without Mackenzie Milton, and it happened when they were kind of on a high, and honestly, like, I think that there's a mood around this team is like the end of an era, and it ended almost, and I think it's going to be a very different team next year. At least 7 starters this year were seniors on defense. On offense, Dredrick Snelson, I think he's gone. Kalubi is gone. You're losing Hudanik and Wyatt Miller on the offensive line. Taj McGowan's not going to be on the team next year, so that's at least 5 guys that are major parts of the offensive, unit that are gone. I honestly think it's, and Lord knows if Mackenzie's going to even be able to play next year. Likely not, right? So it almost feels like they can not necessarily start over, but they can reset and build off of what they built from these 2 years. And I think that the program is in much better hands. I think that, the guys that they got 4 stars on the defensive line next year. That defensive line is going to be real young, and they're going to be real raw. And I don't think you get those guys without these winning streaks. I mean, you heard the guy, I forget his name, the recruit that we just got from DC. What's his name again? Can someone help me out?
Cam Good. Cam Good.
Yeah, Cam Good's friend. What's his friend's name? The guy that just.
You talking about the kid who just Tremont Morris Brash?
Drop.
Okay.
Yeah, Drop. We're calling him Drop. I'm calling him Drop. Like, too long of a name. He said he called himself Drop on TV. I'm calling him Drop. He said that this is the best team in Florida.
It is.
He said that this is winning. All they do is win, and you can't say that And that guy doesn't say that 2 years ago. And I honestly think that Dylan Gabriel is going to get the starting job next year at some point. I think it's going to be a very different team next year.
Hot take. Write it down.
Is Heupel's guy. It's like Josh Heupel has more of a stamp on this team than he did this year. He's going to be able to build off of it. It's going to be year 2 for him. He's going to be much more, familiar with his stuff. I think it's just, yes, they had that Fiesta Bowl win, 4 or 5 years ago against Baylor, but it almost like that 0-12 year kind of, brought that down, and they were forced to start from square one again. But now that they've, built this culture for as long as they have, and they brought in all these guys that have changed the culture, I think it's going to be, I think they can reset, but they are off to a much better start than they were when they were, won the Fiesta Bowl the first time.
Okay.
So I think that, people know what UCF is now. I did not know what UCF was until they won the Fiesta Bowl the first time. I had no idea what it was, because I'm not a Florida guy. I'm a Houston kid, born and raised. I knew Texas schools, and that was about it. I didn't know what UCF was, but I guarantee you, a lot more people know who UCF is now because of all that they've done in these last 2 years. So I think it's only the start of a new era for UCF.
Luke, and then Eric, and then we'll take a break. Luke, what do you think?
Well, hopefully we're not going to be looking back at it and saying, "Oh man, those were the glory days." Hopefully, we'll be looking back at it and saying, "Wow, those 2 seasons were the catalyst for where our program is now." So when all is said and done, this will go down as one of the best runs in modern college football history. And I don't think, regardless of who we played, what conference we're in, so on and so forth, nobody can take that away from UCF. I mean, 25 straight wins, 2 conference championships, 4 wins over AP, or 5 wins over AP top 25 teams. What more can you ask for? I mean, and the most important thing he did was build the brand for UCF. And listen, a lot of people hate UCF for, well, I think more so hate some of the fans, and I, we definitely brought that upon ourselves. But hey, I'd rather be hated than not known at all.
Yeah,
exactly.
Brian actually, in his little rap piece on blackandgoldbanneret.com, quoted Reggie Jackson, and a great quote from him. He said, "They don't boo."
That's a great quote.
Yeah, they don't boo nobodies. Was the great quote, and I think that's right.
The Hurricanes, Miami Hurricanes, in the '80s too.
Yeah, I mean, believe me. I grew up in South Florida and knew all about that. Elo, I'll give you the last word. What's going to be? What's the final sentence on this paragraph in UCF history?
Well, I think the guys kind of put all of them pretty much good perspective on it. I would concur with. I would add, I think the Fiesta Bowl is kind of a footnote, to be honest. I think the streak that I'll remember is it brought College Game Day. You talk about national respect, that's what you get. You get College Game Day coming to your campus. Who would have thought that? And then you get Chris Fowler and Kurt Herbstreit, 2 of the biggest names in college football, the voices of college football, to do your game. And quite honestly, even Kurt Herbstreit's gone on record. I mean, his perception of UCF changed from coming here. There was an article on Sporting News. Bill Bender interviewed Kirk, and Kirk admitted that, you know what, having seen UCF in person, I see what they're doing, and I understand now that I didn't get before. So I hope that the fans, appreciate what we just saw, because this doesn't mean it's going to continue. It might. Boise State has been consistent for 2 decades. Alabama, certainly at their level, has been consistent. But, Jeff mentioned the teams that had those long win streaks. Miami never came back ever when that streak ended. Florida State really wasn't the same when they lost to Oregon and that streak ended. So it's really uncertain what happened. There's no guarantees in life in the future. That's why I think Jeremy made the point. I mean, in some ways, the Josh Heupel era starts now, because now the question will be moving forward is, can they continue this success or does the program drop to quote unquote a 9-3 season, let's say? And then if they go quote unquote 9-3, how do the fans react to that? Do they all of a sudden think it's a disaster, whereas maybe 5 years ago we would have taken and celebrated a 9-3 year? I think those are some interesting questions moving forward. But certainly, more people know who UCF is, and I think hopefully now we appreciate the last 25 games more, because I feel like sometimes we just focus too much on stuff you couldn't control, rankings, who likes us, who doesn't like us. And maybe we didn't really focus on, look at what we're watching in front of our eyes here. This is something that will be talked about for years and decades.
Yeah. Okay, this will be our last rapid fire, then we're going to go to a break. And I'll go down the line and ask everybody what they think UCF's final season-ending ranking will be in the final poll. And Eric, I'll start with you.
I actually was working on this because I got asked about this after the game. I think they will end up 9 or 10. I think they'll have the third top 10 program in history. I think they'll finish 9th or 10th. I'm going to warn everybody, though, Florida is going to be ranked ahead of them. So I'm just giving you the heads up right now. So do what you got to do with that.
Jeremy?
I think they benefit from Georgia losing, from Michigan losing. So yeah, they might. Florida will be ahead of them because they were one behind them and they won. So I, however, think that UCF is going to be like 11 or 12. Just again to be like, you should have won. Like, I don't know. But last thought, I can't wait for the UCF 30 for 30 to come out in like 5 years. I'm really excited for that. I'll be more than happy to help produce it. Yeah, maybe we'll make it. Yeah,
Murphy better be in it. He was a part of every win.
Black Gold Banneret production.
That's right. Yeah. The guys from the UConn blog, they did one on the entire history of the conflict rivalry. So if they can do that, heck, we can do the streak. Chris, we'll go with you. Where do you think UCF will be ranked in the final ranking?
Well, I have no faith in polls, as most people know. I believe we're going to be 12 or worse.
Okay, you think that they're really going to drop UCF?
I haven't looked at who lost, and I think they'll try to hammer us.
Okay,
12 or worse.
And then and Luke, will finish with you. What do you think?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a final CFP poll, right? It's just the final AP poll.
AP and coaches.
AP and coaches do a final poll, yeah.
Right. So I think the AP poll has always, throughout the struggles with rankings, has always been fairer to us than the actual playoff committee. With everybody losing the top 10, I definitely think, we can squeak in at 10, 9 or 10. Florida will jump us, and rightfully so. They beat a top Michigan team. But I think because so many of the teams in that 3 through 10 had lost, that we'll still be in the mix. I'm more so curious to see where they put LSU.
Yeah, LSU came in at 11 in the AP, UCF at 7.
They'll be ahead They'll be ahead of UCF.
Yeah. Georgia was,
ahead of us.
Believe it or not, Georgia was the only team that was ahead of was one spot ahead of UCF in the latest AP. So they were at 6. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think UCF is probably going to. I think it's 50-50 whether or not they end up in the top 10.
How far do you think Notre Dame falls?
Not as far as many think. Not
right.
as far as many.
No, I think like 2-3 spots.
Yeah. I mean, if that, I think that they'll probably even keep them in the top. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they'll probably keep them in the top 4.
I think they say at 4.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep them at the 4 because A, it's Notre Dame, and B, they were in the playoff.
Oklahoma and them flip flop. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right.
Well, it depends if Clemson beats Alabama.
That's also true. That's also true. So, all right. We'll wrap this thing up here, or we'll not wrap up, but we're going to take a break. But before we do, Eric and Luke are going to come back. We're going to talk a little hoops coming up. But Chris, we'll start with you. As though people don't already know, where can people follow you on social media?
It's UCF Knights Nation, NATN. So UCF Knights and NATN.
Gotcha.
Twitter.
Right. And Jeremy Brener, what about you?
And follow me at Jeremy Brenner.
All right, and Jeremy, I know you're going to be
Jeremy Renner, but That's what I tell people.
I know you're were you dropping Woj bombs earlier tonight or something?
No, I was just picking them up for everybody. He drops them, I pick them up.
Well, what happened today? Earlier today, was it?
Memphis traded Marshawn Brooks. Yeah, the actual Marshawn Brooks to Chicago
for Justin Holiday and draft picks, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I heard Memphis wanted Drew Holiday, but they ended up getting Justin. So, people just can't get the right guy anymore. They can't just say last names; they have to say full names.
Lots of moving parts. I don't even.
In order to trade on NBA trade, yeah.
I used to follow I still follow the NBA. I used to follow it much more closely, but I did not get that joke. Sorry. All right, guys. Thanks again. And listen, stick around. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk a little hoops as the conference season has begun. We've got. We'll be looking at UCF and Temple. But in the meantime, once again, thanks to you guys, Chris and Jeremy, for hanging. And hopefully we'll have you guys.
Hang for hoops.
You want to hang for hoops? Okay, hang for hoops.
Yeah.
There. All right.
Right there.
Hoop season, man.
All right, stick around. We'll be right back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by Orlando Homes Express, brokered by eXp Realty. Sam Unger and his team at Orlando Homes Express proudly serve Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties, specializing in buying, selling, and new construction. Sam is a very proud UCF graduate, class of 2006, and he's got a special deal going on right now for the 2018 UCF football season. Night fans, in honor of UCF's 25-game win streak, Sam is running a special for the whole month of December. If you use him as your realtor to buy or sell your home, you'll receive up to $2,500 at closing. So, if you're ready to buy a new home or sell your current home, upgrade or downsize, Sam and his team have you covered so you can find the right home at the right price in the right location. So give them a call right now at 407-790-9957. Again, that's 407-790-9957. Or visit them on the web at WeSellOrlando.net. Again, that's WeSellOrlando.net. You can also reach them on Facebook at Facebook.com/WeSellOrlando. Get in touch with Orlando Homes Express today and make finding your dream home a reality.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I lied. Chris and Jeremy are going to stick around with us here as we talk a little UCF hoops. Remember, we are at blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are SB Nation's home for your UCF Knights. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret. You can follow us individually on Twitter at Jeff_Sharon. Eric Lopez Elo, Luke Sarris SBN, Jeremy Brener, and UCF Knights Nation. That's NATN. That is Chris's Twitter handle. So did I forget anybody? There's like 17 people on this podcast. All right, we're going to keep it going with the full Monty here, and we're going to talk a little UCF hoops. We're in this sort of lull spot in the UCF schedule where the spring sports aren't starting up just yet. They really get cranking around February. So once the bowls are over, the month of January is for hoops. And for UCF men's basketball, they couldn't have asked for a better way to start the conference season. They opened up against Temple at home and got the victory over the Owls. 78-73 was the final at CFE Arena. Just recapping some of the top performers for the Knights. Leading scorer was B.J. Taylor with 24 points on 7 of 12 shooting. He was also 7 of 12 at the line. 5 Knights were in double figures in this game. Taco Fall with a double-double, 16 and 11 on 7 of 9 shooting, but again was 33% from the line. So it is what it is. Colin Smith had a dozen points on 5 of 8 from the floor to go with 4 rebounds. Terrell Allen, 11 points and 7 assists. And Aubrey Dawkins, 10 points on 5 of 9 shooting. So your entire starting 5 gets double figures, only 5 points off the bench, 3 of them from Chad Brown and 2 from Deion Griffin. But the Knights led the game by as much as 13 in the second half, and then Temple kind of cut it close there toward the end. But UCF still managed to pull it off to pull it off by shooting 60% from the field, 60.4%, 29 of 48. Of course, the free throw shooting is a little bit of a concern at 57%, 16 to 28 from the line. The Knights were, but even so, that was enough to take care of a Temple team that came in with double-digit wins into conference play. So, yeah, at least what do we make of this from this point? Luke Sarris, I'll start with you. You were at the game. You saw it up close and personal. Give us the lowdown on it. Conference play is always such a different animal because when you dive right into it, it's a much different intensity. And UCF was able to take care of business in this game to get off to that good start and advance their record to 11-2 and 1-0 in the AAC. Were you impressed with the performance, or did you feel like it could have been a little bit better?
Temple always gives UCF a hard time. They're always towards the top of the conference. I think UCF played well outside of free throw shooting, which has been the obvious struggle with this team, for the past couple of seasons. But this was a good Temple team. This was a good Temple team that had wins over Missouri and Davidson, to name a few. And I do the AAC blogger poll for basketball, and for a large, for the majority of my polls, I had Temple in front of us. I wasn't really too sold on how we were going to play out this season, but it was a huge conference win, and it definitely gets us off on the right foot. And I think it's a little strange when you have a better field goal percentage than free throw percentage, but
no kidding.
We really got to get that down. But the team, they're learning. Everybody's learning their role, and we're finally seeing some offense for the first time since Matt Williams was here.
Yeah, Temple came in 10-3 on the year. Their losses were to Virginia Commonwealth, Villanova, and where am I missing one? No, they were 10-2. They were 10-2. Yeah, I'm sorry. UCF was the third loss. Thank you. What is it about that Temple team? You're right, though. It seems like they always give everybody fits. I mean, you're going to get a tough physical game. Maybe not quite on the par of, like, say, a Cincinnati would, but they're going to stick right with you on the floor, at least physically. I don't know, Elo. What did you think about how UCF performed in this game? Because like I said, I just get worried about these late game situations with the free throw shooting. Man, this just drives me absolutely crazy.
No, that's very legitimate. I mean, they almost let Temple get back in a back door there. Temple shot the ball well from the three. I mean, they're good. And this league is good. I mean, this league is better than I think what the preseason perspective that a lot of people thought.
I do agree with that, by the way. I mean, we have, 6 teams with 10 wins coming into the conference play, right?
Yeah, and a lot of teams are improved. Like South Florida was the worst team in the league last year. Is much better. They just beat UConn. They're definitely got some momentum, mojo going with Brian Gregory over there. And my concern, to your point, you're going to have a lot of close games, and you're right. The free throw shooting is a concern because, boy, you just hope that that could come back to bite you in a couple games here in a tight race in the conference. The thing that I enjoyed, I think Taco Fall quietly is playing his best basketball of his career offensively to go along with the defense. I think he's raised his game, and that's typically what you'd like to see from your seniors. And I think it's no accident that him and BJ led the way scoring-wise for this offense. And I think the interesting thing will be as we move forward is how do they get Aubrey more involved? I feel like Aubrey kind of deferred a little bit to BJ and Taco there, which is, that's fine. But I still think there's the best basketball ahead for Aubrey, and they're going to need him, especially when they go on the road to a game like UConn, where you're not, you don't have the crowd behind you or the home court behind you. That's going to be interesting how they see. But that's a good, solid win to start off against a well-coached Temple team.
Chris, what did you think about it?
To echo kind of what Eric said, the free throw shooting is really worrisome for me because this is a good league this year, and good teams and good coaches will key on the fact that you're a bad free throw shooting team. And I worry that this team with so much promise is going to have 2 or 3 losses that they shouldn't have had, and ultimately it'll be a disappointing season. But again, what Eric said about Aubrey Dawkins, I think he's kind of sliding himself into the easing himself into the offense, and like I said, deferring. But I think if we see these marquee games coming up, I think you'll really see Aubrey Dawkins step out to be one of UCF's top 2 or if not best players, because he has that ability. I was disappointed the fact we gave up 73 points. I don't know what's happened to our nation leading defense. We used to do that against good teams before, but now it's all of a sudden we're not a top defensive team anymore, not even in our league. So that was kind of surprising. I think Temple is Temple one of the teams that either receive votes or they're in the top 50 RPI or something like that. So I didn't really know how good they were, but they appear to be a good team, just like most of the league. So my big focus is, are we going to be a better free throw shooting team? Because if not, I think there's going to be some disappointments down the conference schedule.
And I want to turn to Jeremy on this too, because I think that this is kind of the it becomes fairly easy for UCF to sort of trip up UCF down the stretch, because if you're an opposing coach, listen, you guys have forgotten more basketball in the last 5 minutes than I will remember, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that, all right, who are the weak free throw shooters out there on the floor for UCF? All you got to do, so you can start with basically Taco Fall, right? And if Johnny Dawkins does the thing that he should do, all right, in that situation, which is take Taco off the floor and sort of do that substitution offense for defense, the problem you run into is when you do that, then other teams can attack the rim down the stretch, and that wipes out your best defensive weapon in terms of in terms of rim protection down the stretch. Because if he can't play because of the free throw shooting, that's going to be a problem. And also, I think this is another thing that when teams do this, and we've seen a couple teams do this in situations where they have key players who are poor foul shooters, it burns your timeouts a lot, and game management becomes much more difficult down the stretch in close games when you have to burn timeouts to get bad free throw shooters off the court. And that's an issue because, again, like Eric alluded to, you're also losing one of your top offensive weapons and certainly one of your top, well, he is your top rebounder, 94 rebounds, 7.2 a game to start the season. So it's, I don't know. I feel like if UCF is going to win games, they have to do so by larger margins in order to guarantee themselves a situation where they can get, I don't want to not run off the floor, but they end up tripping over themselves in close games here. Jeremy, what do you think? I mean, you've seen this team from the start of the season. You've seen the adjustments that they've made with in some of these closer games, which they've had the opportunity. They've had a couple of them in the preseason, so to speak. Not really the preseason, the non-conference season, but and UCF has come up short in a few close games earlier this year. So what is the play the rest of the way for them, do you think?
I think they said this last night. UCF lost 2 games this year by a combined score of 3 points.
Basically buzzer beaters, right? Because there was the buzzer beater against FAU, and then there was the buzzer beater that tied the game in Mizzou.
Yes, and that was an overtime game. Free throw shooting wasn't that bad in that game. They only missed 5 free throws, but against FAU, the game they really should have won, they missed 9 free throws. And yes, you can say, but I mean, speaking on this game in particular, Taco was absolutely necessary. It was one of Taco's better games that I've seen him play. They were comparing him to Shaq on the broadcast. I wouldn't go that far, I mean, Taco Fall is definitely not Shaquille.
Right.
But he was fulfilling his purpose yesterday, and he was simply clogging the paint. And that's why UCF is so good defensively, is because Taco Fall, all he has to do is literally exist. All he has to do is exist on the floor, and you cannot score a layup.
Right.
They literally, like, he's almost like a force field for them. It's like you can't score. So the reason why Temple was in the game yesterday, they made 13 threes on 27 shots. They're a good outside scoring team, yet they only shot 45% from the floor. So compared to UCF's 60%. UCF's offense was way more efficient yesterday than Temple's, and that's why, yes, 73 points Temple, and Chris mentioned that maybe the defense wasn't that bad. I don't think it's necessarily the defense. I think it's just the defense that UCF plays, the 2-3 zone or the whatever, even they try the 1-3-1 sometimes. It works because Taco being out there changes the complexion of the game, and and the reason why I think UCF won yesterday is because they utilized Taco on the offensive floor, and that's sometimes very difficult for UCF to do. Because Taco does so much defensively, it's why you need to keep him out there. It's why even if he misses a couple of free throws here and there, it's still the pros outweigh the cons when it comes to Taco most of the time. So, but the reason why they won that game, they were able to get him offensively in a rhythm. They were able to play the pick and roll. Taco even had this insane pass that I didn't even know Taco could pass. Like, the fact that he could pass, unbelievable. It's maybe the best pass I've seen from Taco Fall ever. But even like Aubrey yesterday, Aubrey had 5 of 9, and he had 2 missed free throws, which very rarely do you see that from Aubrey. Even BJ, he had a poor shooting night, but there was a game earlier in the year where BJ and Aubrey, it was against Alabama. It was at home. They went 19 of 21 from the free throw line. It's all about getting and Johnny Dawkins said this in that press conference after the Alabama game. He said it's about getting the ball in the right shooter's hands at the end of the game. And at a night where the free throw shooting just isn't in the rhythm like it was last night, they were still able to win. And I think that just goes to show how UCF can find ways to win, and that's what makes this team better than any team that we've seen in the last couple of years, because they still are that stout defensive team. I still think they're one of the best defensive teams in the country. It's just the offense that needs to get going, and it's going to come from BJ and Aubrey. But even on nights when Aubrey isn't good, Taco's there. And even Colin Smith was there last night, so that's why they were still able to win last night. I think they're all right. I think that this is a good first game. I also wouldn't even call it a home game. You saw that student section, that all of 2 people.
There was nobody there.
It's hard. It's hard when school isn't in session and that. So when you have a home game during the break, it's kind of tough because it's almost like you're losing a home game. But they were still able to get the win, so that's I think it's pretty impressive. So
yeah,
it's a good building block. The best kind of wins are the wins that aren't perfect and you can still learn from something from it. So I think they learned a lot from this game, and they can use it moving forward. And it's still a win towards their resume that they will probably need come March.
So Luke,
I like the fact we had 5 guys in double figures. That bodes well for the future.
Offense is huge. And even like on a bad night, Aubrey still brought 10 points to the table. So I like the balanced offense, but also I'd like to see Aubrey and BJ still more featured than they were last night, or at least Aubrey, not necessarily BJ, but Aubrey more especially.
Luke, I wanted to come back to you as we wrap men's basketball here. So as we look around the conference, Houston is still undefeated. They're 14-0. What a season that they've had, unexpectedly so, I think. Cincinnati at 12-2. They got off to a good start in conference as well. USF at 11-2, SMU 9-4. Temple is, despite the losses, 10-3. Tulsa's 10-4. They're also off to a good start. UConn at 9-5. The next up for UCF, as we look at the schedule ahead, they have the game against UConn at the XL Center in Hartford on Saturday at noon. That game's on ESPN News. This is going to be a very hungry UConn team coming into this game after they've lost their conference opener. What do you see from that game coming up as UCF starts the away portion of the home schedule before they have 8 days off until their next conference game against ECU, which is at home?
UConn, I think UConn's one of those teams that as of late you get caught up in the name. They clearly haven't had the success they had coming off a national championship just a few seasons ago. Kudos. Really, honestly, kudos to USF for the turnaround on their program. But yes, they're 11-2 or 10-2, or they're 11-2. But if you look at their games and who they beat and the scores of those games, yes, very much improved. But they're still not at that level yet. Where I think once conference play really kicks off, you'll see more of that. So UConn taking that loss against South Florida, I think, kind of shows where they are at as a program. And UCF has fared well against them in basketball in the past couple of seasons, and I definitely expect that to continue. I think at the end of the season, when you look at the standings, UConn's going to be, towards the middle bottom of the pack.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to really know until we get to sort of the middle of the conference season where everyone's kind of stacking up. But the thing is with UCF, I think the key right now is just defend the home court as much as you possibly can. If they can get the win at UConn, which even though you're right, this is not your dad's UConn.
It's the house of horrors.
Yeah, that place has just been terrible to UCF over the years, and to try and get one win there, even I don't care how weak UConn is, it's just get one win in that place so that you can kind of get that monkey off your back, right, Eric? I mean, it's just been year after year that place, unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in the past. When you think of the conference, there was 3 places. I remember we had Taylor Young about this last year. There's 3 places there has been the house of horrors for UCF. Memphis for a long time, going back to Conference USA, up until last year when UCF finally won a game up there. And then the other 2 is Tulsa and UConn. They have not played well there, and that includes some of the bad UConn teams recently. So that's why I thought the Temple win was big, because yes, UConn's not what they are. Although Dan Hurley's taken over, they're playing hard. They did beat Syracuse earlier in the year, and they're going to be at home. And I think UConn's going to be one of those teams that's going to be a different team at home and on the road, and that's tough to win in conference on the road. The big thing is this, boys, because I just checked this. Joe Lunardi in his last bracketology has UCF in as a 10 seed, part of a 3-bid league for the American. For the first time that I can remember, UCF, I think, has done what they needed to do in the non-conference to put themselves in position to make a run to make the NCAA tournament. Will they do it? We'll see. That's what conference games are about. But that's significant to me, and it's interesting because the basketball program is kind of the opposite of football, whereas the media loves the basketball program. I mean, if you look at John Rothstein, Andy Katz, they love this basketball team, and I think that's brought a lot of the attention and pressure to this team for this year, as Chris has brought up, trying to break that slide of making the tournament for the first time since 2005. So they've got everything in front of them, and you're right, Jeff. If you could steal some games on the road, i.e. one here in UConn, that would go a long way in accomplishing that goal.
So, by the way, one little note I wanted to add here before we move on to the women's team. All right, so there's no RPI. Well, there is an RPI, but the NCAA has decided not to use it. Instead, they are using the equally opaque net rankings, which they've made up. And UCF right now, though, jumped 7 spots in the latest net rankings, from 41 to 34. So UCF is 34th in that net ranking, which I'm guessing that the NCAA committee is going to use quite a bit in the coming months to figure out if there are at-large bids at stake. Of course, if you're UCF, you don't want to put it to that. You want to win the conference outright. But hey, I mean, this should be a 3 to 4 bid league this year, I do think. And in that case, I do think UCF should, that's got to be the goal. They're actually 1 spot behind Florida. Top American Athletic Conference team in the net rankings right now, believe it or not, Houston at number 4. 14-0, that'll get you there. They're behind Duke at 1, Virginia at 2, Michigan at 3. Cincinnati is the second highest AAC team in the net rankings at 25, and then UCF is the third at 34. So something we got to keep in mind.
3 teams into the field, right
there. You go. Right. So, all right. So that's men's basketball. As we take a look, once again, a reminder, their next game will be on the road at UConn Saturday, January 5th, noon, ESPN News for that. And they have 8 days off until they're back at home on Sunday, January 13th at 4 against ECU. All right. Quickly flipping over to women's basketball. They had a 2-point win, came back and beat Quinnipiac at Quinnipiac. And Eric Lopez, you were right. You gave me the heads up on Quinnipiac, and they were a game squad at home, but UCF came up with the win. It was not pretty, 47-45, but KK Wright with 17 points. She was the lone knight in double figures. UCF did not shoot well in this game, 34% from the field, but they held Quinnipiac to 30% from the field, and they got the 2-point victory. So with that, UCF women's basketball is at 11-2, and let's give them a round of applause because they now head into conference play with 2 key games coming up in the next week. Obviously, they start conference play at Memphis on Saturday, January 5th. That game will be televised on CBS Sports Network, 5 p.m. on Saturday. So right after the men's game, make sure you flip over to CBS SN to check out UCF at Memphis. And then comes Tuesday, January 8th at South Florida. And the Bulls have been the bugaboo of UCF for years and years and years and years and years. 2 seasons ago, notwithstanding, when UCF got their first win ever at the Sun Dome, beating a then-ranked South Florida team. But South Florida suffered a very key injury over this past week, didn't they, Elo?
It was actually a few weeks ago. I didn't even realize it, but it was November. Right? It was right after USF beat Oklahoma, their star 2-time All-American.
Kitty Alaksa.
Yeah, tore ACL, out. The senior's out for the year, and they got destroyed by LSU over the weekend in Baton Rouge. That game was on SEC Network. I watched it. They're not the same team without her, obviously. And that is significant because that's been the number 2 team in the conference, quite frankly, with Jose Fernandez there behind UConn, obviously. So that door is open. And from UCF, you mentioned that that's their best non-conference start, by the way, in program history. That is significant. Their RPI, I believe, is 19. And Charlie Cream, who we've had on.
Correct, 19. That's right.
Yep. And Charlie Cream, who's the Joe Lunardi of women's basketball, and we've had on this podcast, just released his first bracketology, and UCF's in. It's a 10 seed, just like the men. It's a 2-bid league. That's the thing. The American right now in women's looking like a 2-bid league, and it's UCF's is the best shot for the second team because South Florida's got some issues. So huge opportunity here for the women's basketball program for Coach Abe here. They've put themselves in position, Jeff, with the way they've scheduled non-conference and the way they've won games in non-conference. You mentioned Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac was a team that made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament last year, beat Miami in the NCAA tournament. It's a good program, and that's a quality win on the road. And they put themselves now in position to be an NCAA tournament team, and that's critical because, let's be honest, in the American and women's basketball, there really isn't no automatic bid. That automatic bid's already, it's going to stores. So you really got to build up your resume. And really, if you're UCF, the goal is to finish second. I mean, they're not going to say that, obviously. Your goal is to win the league, but let's be real. It's UConn. You're in the league. So opportunity. And I think big, but you got to start. It'll be interesting how they come out on the road here against Memphis because it's easy to overlook and look forward to that rivalry game. Do not overlook a road game at Memphis. Don't come out sloppy. And all of a sudden, you get yourself in a bit of a tricky game here, and you drop a game you probably don't want to that could come back to haunt you down the road.
Now, okay, here's the part of the show where, usually, if Murph was here, he just kind of takes the back seat while Eric and I talk about this. But I want to get you guys in there. And, Chris, I want to get you in on this, too, because it's funny. I think of that the tweet that John Rothstein always sends out whenever UCF wins. He says, UCF, more than a football school. And we've been arguing all the time about how UCF is, yes, it's more than a football school. Yes, it's also more than a football and men's basketball school. And I think that the women's basketball team has shown a key part of that. So to you guys who, haven't had the chance to talk about this kind of stuff, talk about, non-sports that aren't football or men's basketball on the podcast before, what do you see as the sort of caliber that UCF is in sports like women's basketball? And where do you see the program going from here, at least from what you've been able to glean over the years? And Chris, I want to start with you.
I'm really impressed with the hire of Coach Abe. I think she's going to lead this program for a long time to higher and higher levels. She's a great fundamentals coach, obviously great in the locker room. So I think we'll see steps higher and higher. I really look forward to a race between women's and men's basketball, a real competition this year to see who can go higher, because they're neck and neck, and I like what I see from both programs.
This is the best that I've seen both programs at the same time since probably the A Sundays in the early to mid 2000s, when Gail Striegler was churning out a machine for UCF women's basketball, and Kirk Sparrow won 2 consecutive conference championships. Go ahead.
I don't ever remember women's. I mean, since the 80s, I don't ever remember women's basketball even being a blip on the radar as far as school sports. But, it's a great time for all sports in UCF. And like Danny White said, we're building a top 25 program in all sports.
Yeah. Joe, what about you, Jeremy?
This actually might surprise you. I sat right in front of KK Wright in a class this semester.
Mm.
And
she didn't copy off your paper, did she?
I hope. I mean, we had maybe one exam in that class. I don't even remember. But and honestly, and Tolu, I don't want to butcher her last name, so I'm not going to say it.
Tolu Omakore, who is everyone's favorite UCF athlete, by the way. I have to put that on the record because she is the best. Anyway, go ahead.
She is the best. She is the best. I'm just gonna second you on that. If y'all haven't seen, did she ever get a second episode of her show on Twitter?
Yeah, she's had a few of them on there. They put them
takes or something like that.
Tolu's takes. It's phenomenal.
Whatever. It's must-watch TV in 2019.
Should get her on the show.
The New Year's resolution should be watched. Just get Tolu out there. She's fantastic. And KK Wright is leading this team, and almost she's the leader of the team. And being around her in class and all that, you can tell. I mean, she's very quiet, but she leads by example.
Quiet confidence.
I can see that. Quiet confidence with her, yeah. And she's hard to dislike. And same with Tolu, and same with Coach Abe. And to me, it's like, well, you put a whole bunch of those people together and they have the same goal and the same idea of how to get to that goal. That doesn't surprise me that this team is playing this well. And yes, maybe the teams that they're playing aren't, to their level, but in the world of college, women's college basketball, it's not as easy to tell, who this team is clearly better than this team, or this team is clearly better than that team, because it doesn't get as much coverage as other sports does. But I have like a special place in my UCF heart for the women's team, just because I don't say I know them, but maybe if you're like, oh yeah, you were in my class, it's nice. It's nice having your classmates do well. Good for them. I'm so happy for them, and I hope that they can keep it going. Yeah.
They seem to have such really good chemistry with one another on and off the floor, certainly. And now I do PA in the arena for those games, so I'm at the scorer's table, and I can hear every interaction between coach and the players. And there's no doubt that Coach Abe has extremely high expectations for her players. And listen, they know that, but I do sense a much, and I think the example you brought up, Jeremy, of KK Wright is so key, because, I mean, I remember that freshman year, she looked sometimes like she was going the wrong way through a revolving door at times, just kind of trying to figure out what it's like to be a college basketball player. But the confidence that she has on the floor, in her ability to run the offense, in her shooting especially, because she really wasn't all that much of a scoring threat. I mean, she was, but not to the extent that she is now until this year. And the one thing I wanted to really point out is this team prides itself on defense. They are number one in the American in fewest points allowed at 53.7, and yes, that's fewer than UConn allows. UConn allows 55.1. Now, UConn scores 85, and UCF only 65, but still, there are 4 teams in the American that have a plus double-digit scoring margin. UConn's first, obviously. They're outscoring their opponents by 30 a game. You almost have to throw them out. It's USF and UCF right behind them at 14.6 and 12.2. And that shows, and for the UCF, the key has been the defense. Luke Sarris, you have seen, to what extent that you have seen women's basketball play, what are I think Chris brought up a good point about, we kind of have I almost like to think of it as like a little friendly competition between the men's team and the women's team to see who can get as far as they can get in this year. And I think so far, I would actually have to say, due respect to the men's team, I think the women's team has had the upper hand in terms of how they played overall. What do you think?
Well, I mean, both teams are 11-2. 2 seasons ago, the men's team was at the NIT. Then last season, the women's team makes the NIT. But at 11-2 is a great start. You're always going to be kind of in the shadows with the UConn. But I think that's pretty much every other program in Division I women's basketball.
Right.
But
it's almost like you're playing against the United States Olympic team. In that respect. It's like you're a college athlete playing a sport, but not getting. You just know you're not going to have the opportunity to play for a national title, no matter how well you do. Yeah, it's so tough. I feel like there should be. You almost have to, when you're talking about the American in terms of women's hoops, you almost have to throw UConn out whenever you think about the No, it's true.
I just want to give some perspective here. 20, 30 years ago, we never thought we'd be playing for a national championship in football. So it takes time, but it is possible.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
That was pretty much a sly remark about the football team with their success not being able to, make it to the top. But
yeah.
Nonetheless, no, it's great to see. Like, you look at our soccer teams, our volleyball team, even baseball and softball throughout the last couple of years. We are really building a powerhouse, and not just football, and not just the notoriety men's basketball is getting this season. But
men's and women's golf.
Yeah,
across all of our athletics, and that is absolutely huge for the UCF brand because it's all part of the vision. It's all part of the vision of Danny White, and it's incredible to see it come to fruition.
And Eric Lopez is probably, I'm going to jump in on him and say, also, don't forget about tennis, too. Am I right, Elo?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, the NCAA is in women's tennis for the first time in 16 years, and John Roddick and company were there a couple years ago. By the way, they're going to host the American Conference Championship this year in tennis, so high expectations there. But, yeah, I mean, that's been the vision of Danny White, to build this into a top 25 program and across the board, not just football. And I think the fan base now has to follow suit, because I think Danny White's done his part. The players are doing their part. The coaches are doing their part. Now it's up to the fans. And quite frankly, I want to see better participation from the fans. I mean, we talked about it earlier with the men's game. There was not a lot of people there. I understand students why they weren't there, because school hadn't started yet, but what's the excuse for the other fans? We spent so much time talking about the football fan base. I don't want UCF fan base just to be a football fan base. It should be an all sports fan base, and it's got the ability to be that way. And so hopefully as we get to 2019 and beyond, and as we grow this, we'll start seeing more and more fans support these teams, because that can make a difference. Home court, home fields, whatever the sport, makes a huge difference.
I think that
with men's basketball,
huge
they had that
difference.
with the NIT.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, so when I was in college, the athletics department had a student marketing board, right? And I was chair of this board, and one of the things I was upset with was men's basketball attendance. So I created this report on average attendance by year. When there was a point when CFE, first opened, those first couple of seasons, UCF was averaging 7,500 fans a game. 7,500. We are lucky to get 3,500, 4,000 out there now.
What's happened? How did that happen? How did we drop off? I know that the sanctions, the Donnie Jones era, I think soured a lot of people, perhaps some of the program there. But I mean, that's the question that I have for all of you guys. Do you guys have a theory why we don't draw more in basketball? Because we talk about the student enrollment all the time when it comes to football attendance. Why can't that be applied to basketball?
Well, I
have a theory.
Go ahead, Chris. I want to know what your theory is.
Honestly, it's got to start with marketing. They got to start marketing this basketball team like they do football. If it's a top 25 program, it's a top 25 program. Marketing gets people in the seats. I don't care if you have gimmicks, fan days, giveaways. You just got to put people in the seats so they can see the quality of the basketball, and they will keep coming back.
No, I mean, like I said, I worked. I was an intern with the marketing department with athletics. The guy who was in charge of basketball marketing is still in charge of basketball marketing, and they do a great job. They do a lot of great giveaways. It's just for some reason there's just not interest amongst the fans and more so anything the students. The students just have no interest in going out to these games, and I have no idea why. But I think with winning and with more success will come higher attendance, just like we saw with football. But when we were averaging 7,500 fans a game, it wasn't like we were some superior program. We had put together, a couple 20-win seasons in Conference USA, but it wasn't anything, substantial. So I think the few rough years when we first got into the American, with Donnie Jones and the struggles we had then, really just turned fans off, and then it kind of lost its buzz.
Weren't we packing them in at the end of last year?
We were.
Didn't we have some sellouts in these big games we had?
Well, we've only had the one sellout, which was the Illinois game in the NIT. But I will say, though, that basketball is an interesting sport because if you're not really, especially in a market where you have an NBA team, all right, and we do, if you're not really, really good, you kind of don't. You're going to be stuck in limbo. Now, I'll give you a good example of this. In 2003, 2004, all right, back when UCF was in the A-Sun, that year, UCF defeated, they won. They had a 14-game winning streak, which they made it to the end of January, having won 14 in a row. At one point, they were 16-2. And they had a home game against Troy, who was also pretty good. I think Troy had only 3 losses on the year at that point. And it was the most attended game in the history of the old arena. It was 4,700 people. Now, it was packed in that place. I remember that day because I covered it. But UCF lost that game by 12 points. But I just remember thinking, okay, this is what's certainly possible with UCF. But the thought was, it takes a 14-game winning streak in order for the fans to really show up in droves. And I think that right when the engine is going for UCF basketball, they seem to stumble, and then I see it on social media where somebody comes up and says, "Oh, there it is, another winnable game that we should have lost." It's almost like the standards that the common fan has for UCF are a little bit out of whack in terms of what it should be. I do believe, though, that attendance for the others, not just men's basketball, but I do believe that attendance for women's basketball really should be a lot better. And I don't think it's the fault of marketing, at least at this, to this point, because they've done a lot of unique things to get people into the stands. It's for women's basketball. It just seems like that, for some reason it's like UConn or bust. And if you're in a major market, I think that is a factor, and that's unfortunate because this women's basketball team I think is really good. And I'll get to you in a second, Eric. But I think that in particular with women's basketball, if they had an atmosphere that was even slightly a fraction of the intensity of the men's basketball game, this team wouldn't lose a game at home. Maybe they would to UConn, but that would be it. I mean, they play that intensely. They play to that level of intensity with probably 1,000 or 2,000 people in the stands, if that. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, that's a whole. We could do another podcast on that. I mean, that's
true
because you're putting in the arena situation. Are they better off playing somewhere like in the venue, which is a smaller arena that doesn't seat as many people but have a better environment like it does for volleyball? I mean, there's a lot of difference back and forth on that. I think the women's basketball situation, I don't think that's a UCF issue. That's a women's basketball problem in general.
That's
outside
fair.
of a handful of programs, not many people really follow women's basketball for various reasons. A lot of people don't like the product. It's going head-to-head against men's basketball a lot of times, and men's basketball is going to win that. I've heard complaints that they're not different than men's basketball, whereas softball, I know I'm a little biased on this, a lot of people like softball because it's different than baseball, so it's a little variety. So I think women's basketball has and in UCF standpoint, you can make the argument from a historical standpoint that women's basketball is probably the fourth most popular women's sport behind women's soccer with the tradition that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly volleyball. We've seen Jeff. I mean, great atmosphere at the venues. And certainly softball's built a great fan base as well. I think that's part of it too. So that's a tougher spot to sell. The men's basketball thing, the thing that's frustrating, and I think it's been brought up already here recently. We used to draw 800,000 people. We used to have nearly 10,000 people there when Marcus Jordan was there, and everybody was excited because, hey, is Michael Jordan going to be in the rafters or whatever?
I think that accounted for a lot of it right there. Are we going to see Michael Jordan tonight?
But but we were there for Illinois was 10,000 packed in quick notice for the NIT quarterfinal. I'm not saying we should be drawing 10,000 every game, but can't we get 6,000, 7,000?
I think it might even be a product of having too many good teams. A lot of these sports you're going to draw strictly from students on campus or students in school. There may be a time factor that they don't have that much time to see every sport, and I think football obviously is pulling the major weight of attendance from on campus. I'm sure it may be a practice, a product. We just have too many good teams, and they don't have time to see them all.
I think one of the other underrated factors is look at the schedule and the home games. You don't have too many. You don't have too many games on weekends or like Friday nights, for example. For example, UConn is here on a Thursday night at 9 p.m. Okay, you have a Thursday night game, 7 p.m. against Houston. You got the USF game, which at home on this year's schedule, which by right should be like a Friday night game. That's on a Wednesday night.
Well, I think that's actually beneficial in terms of the student population because I think college kids are less likely to spend their Friday night at 9:00 at a basketball game than they would be.
Yeah, I agree.
Going out or something like
On
that.
behalf of the entire student population, I think I can speak because I am a student. I agree with that sentiment wholeheartly.
How about the time factor with too many sports to take in? Would you see that as an issue? Because I know when I was in college, even though I was heavily obviously playing football and our time was pretty much sucked out all into that, I barely saw any other sport other than basketball.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Yeah, but I also think that you see, look, the most packed I've ever seen CFE, and I'm only 3 years into being at UCF, was that NIT quarterfinal.
Yeah,
but I think it's because UCF had something to play for, and I think you'll notice that people will come if there's a lot on the line, and people aren't going to come like a game in December against Alabama. Yeah, that there were a lot of people in the stands that night, but it just doesn't have that same appeal as a February game against even then, like a February game against throw out any American team like Wichita State,
Cincinnati, who's ranked in the top 25.
Yeah, I mean when they rushed the court against Cincinnati, but that was on a Sunday. I remember I wanted to go to that Cincinnati game. I couldn't because it was on a Sunday and I happened to be out of town that weekend. But also I think you saw when volleyball was getting good, the attendance was up for volleyball. You saw when the soccer was good, the soccer attendance was up. So when the teams have more to play for and there's more on the line, I think that's when you see attendance start to creep up. And I think that the athletic department does a good job hyping up the teams when they're doing well. And they've had many more chances to do that recently. I think people are always more likely to go if, teams are good. And I think that for the first time ever, every team is good. There's no booger when it comes to UCF athletics, I don't think. So, people are...
Do we even have a bad sport?
No. I mean, I hear that the dodgeball team isn't that good. So I don't know.
Is that an official team?
I won an IM dodgeball championship. I'm damn proud of it.
No, seriously, do we have a varsity sport that is even bad?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say that.
What's our worst sport?
Probably the baseball. I don't know.
The
baseball team
baseball won a championship 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, as somebody who just did a top 18 games of the year.
What's the only sport we haven't won a championship in? Is anybody?
Probably track, right, Jeff?
Track would be our worst sport. Women's track.
Well, women's track won the Conference USA championship. I think the last year they were in Conference USA. So
right. That was Conference USA.
That's true. But let's also not forget that Conference USA and the teams that were competitive in Conference USA moved with us to the American, most notably Houston. So
Houston runs track in men's and women.
But we have beaten them. Now we don't have a men's track team, obviously, that we can speak of.
It's probably track. It's probably track or cross country because it used to be tennis was the answer, and since John Roddick has arrived to run the men's tennis program and be the director of tennis and hire the women's tennis coach, they turned it around.
I would say.
But even track wins the I-4 war every year, so that's good.
I would say that there's not a single sport. This is what we can say, I think, with true definition, is that there's not a single sport on campus at UCF right now that you would say has no chance to win a conference championship. There's not a sport where you can say that.
It's a great thing to say.
I know. And it used to be, all you guys remember this from all the different eras, is there used to be a conference championship was a many splendored thing. Now, the fact that it's become an expectation is it's a little difficult sometimes, especially, I'm sure, on the coaches and the athletes too. But those are the expectations we've always wanted to have because it's possible. And
when we played football, women's soccer was a sport we looked up to because they were
nationally competitive, and they still are. That's never changed, really.
Well, what's so ironic about that? You could arguably say we just had one of the greatest falls in the history of the university, with men's soccer winning the conference championship, getting to the NCAA tournament. You had volleyball win the conference championship, get ranked for the first time in the top 25, and host an NCAA tournament. Football with the success. Ironically, women's soccer is the only one that didn't make the postseason as far as the major fall sports, which go figure, right?
Which,
when that's your weak link, you're doing good at UCF.
Yeah. Now I think I had it. I'm trying to. You're gonna have to forgive me because I'm trying to find the tweet, and this is what we'll end with. But I went back and I calculated the total the total record of UCF sports in the fall of 2018, and I think it was 83, 18, and 4, if I'm not mistaken. I just want to find it. Okay, here it is. Yeah, 83, 18, and 4 for all UCF fall sports combined, and 3 American Athletic Conference titles. And by the way, that includes men's basketball and women's basketball getting off to the starts that they got off to. So, Chris, I think you're right.
That include men's and women's soccer?
That include men's and women's soccer. In fact, women's soccer actually had the, quote, worst record, end quote, of all of them, and they finished 10-7-1.
Is that conference record?
No, that's their total overall record.
I'm pretty sure we had more than 4 losses, and we had 3 in volleyball alone, right?
Well, 4 total losses in volleyball, none in conference. Women's soccer finished 10-7-1, and Eric, you and I have talked about this many times that whole season could have turned on a dime because they had the canceled game at the start of the year that I think kind of affected things a little bit. They had some bad breaks along the way. You could, again, sometimes, how many angels can you dance on the head of a pin? That team could have replaced
a lot of talent from a top 10 team the year before.
Right, and even so, they were 2 goals away from possibly winning a conference championship. So, all right. So So, right now the prospect for the spring, well, they've got those spring sports have quite the act to follow in terms of going up against the fall sports. All right, let's wrap this thing up. As we finish up, I'm gonna go down the line and see what everyone's working on this week as we finish up, and tell UCF fans where they can reach you. And I guess Chris, we'll start with you.
UCF Night Nation on Twitter. Working on a piece about my message to Mackenzie Milton.
All right, Jeremy Brener, what about you?
I'm gonna be followed on Jeremy Brener. That's a B and Brenner. That's my last name. And I want to work on a piece about Dylan Gabriel and why it's the Dylan Gabriel era at UCF.
Wow.
Man, already.
This and DJ Mac.
Already. Man, no love for Quadri Jones either.
I'm pulling for Mac. I think he's going to make great strides.
I'm pulling for DJ Mac. I'm pulling for Quadri. I'm obviously pulling for Mackenzie, but I think
you've fallen in love with that senior highlight reel, haven't you?
It's the lefty.
It's the lefty. It's like Dylan Gabriel.
Lefty.
Dylan Gabriel looks like if you took Tua and Mackenzie and combined them, and then poof, you have Dylan Gabriel. That's
that's a big compliment.
He's not very big. He's the not so hefty lefty.
Luke Sarris, what do you got?
Well, first you can follow me at Luke Sarris SBN. I am going to be rolling out the 2018 football team awards. I just had my basketball preview up, and the team awards.
Are we gonna get to vote on these? We're gonna have a roundtable vote.
I guess I could, but I already kind of.
Let's vote. Let's vote.
Actually, what I think was funny was that we had this debate on the group me about what we name the awards.
Yeah. I think it'd be cool to have
the politically correct names.
Yeah.
Well, listen, there are some players that just
don't deserve an award.
Yeah.
They just don't deserve an award.
I'm in favor of the defensive award being named after Joe Burnett, and the special teams award being named after Mike Hughes. How about that?
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, I like that. And are we in agreement that Kevin Smith, Offensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, I'll run with that.
Dante Culpepper, maybe? Probably the greatest offensive player. I don't know.
Yeah,
you can't go wrong either way.
But
the fans decide.
Let's
do a Twitter poll.
Okay, Twitter poll. We'll put it up right now. Who should we name the UCF Offensive Player of the Year award after? Kevin Smith, Dante Culpepper.
You might as well throw Blake Bortles in there.
Might as well throw Pete DeNovo in there.
Elo, what do you got?
Or Calabrese.
Oh, my God. Hey, lay off Rob Calabrese. He's a nice guy. I actually really like him.
He was
Rob
a multifaceted athlete.
He
played wide receiver and quarterback.
Did a little bit. And he's actually a very good coach right now. I think he's an offensive coordinator at Wagner. Yeah, so he's found a little niche. I'm happy for him. I covered Rob when I was working on campus. He's always a good kid. Always a really good kid. I really liked him. So I always thought he got a bad rap. So, but anyway, Eric Lopez, what do you got?
Also, I'm going to be doing the way too early projected depth chart.
Okay. There you go, Jeremy Brener.
I knew I was forgetting something. Every time you ask me to say what I'm going to be working on, I blank. But that's what I'm working on.
Pencil Cam Good in there at the empty defensive tackle.
I don't think he's eligible immediately.
We got to check on that. That's you know what?
Not. Yeah, maybe not.
That's what these pieces are for, and we're going to find out real quick where he decides to put Dylan Gabriel once Jeremy is done lobbying on his behalf. Eric, what do you got?
Well, I've got a couple things. Obviously, you could go to blackandgoldbanneret.com right now and check out my article on the TV ratings for the Fiesta Bowl. Very interesting. Slightly up nationally from the last year's UCF Peach Bowl. Kind of surprising, and I'm stunned by this. Locally, Orlando, the ratings down compared to last year. This year's game did a 14 locally compared to a 16 last year, which shocked me. You would have thought it was the other way around.
Why do you think that was, by the way?
It's old hat now. You know, we go to a New Year's Six game every year now, so you know.
But it wasn't like we were. But it wasn't like we were up against Florida or a team that had local interest, right?
Florida would have blew the roof off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's still a strong number. Don't get me wrong. It's the third most watched UCF game locally all time. Baylor Fiesta Bowl is still number one. It did about a 17-6 locally.
Yeah.
And last year's Peach Bowl, which a lot of people drove up for or flew up to Atlanta, did a 16. I don't know. I mean, a couple theories, Jeff, real quick. I mean, it was not a lead into the playoffs, so maybe you lost some casual people that are, casual, either football people in Orlando that normally would have tuned in if it was a playoff game as opposed to, so I don't know. Maybe I don't think they lost lesser UCF fans. I think it was probably just some lesser casual fans maybe didn't tune in for whatever the reason, maybe the lack of the playoff or whatever. But it was shocking. I was not expecting that. But you could check out the details on that and how the game did nationally, where it is at rank all time in UCF as we follow the UCF football ratings. And then I will, of course, my Twitter is Eric Lopez Elo. You mentioned spring. Softball and baseball practice began, ladies and gentlemen, on Thursday. In fact, I'm not buying this theory that Murph's on a plane. I think Murph purposely told us that, but in reality, he's inside the baseball stadium sleeping right now.
Hey, Jeremy, you were at the game. What was the ratio of UCF fans? Was it a good turnout? Because I heard the ticket purchases was low.
From my vantage point in the press box, it looked like there were more black than purple, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it looked like that.
I'd say maybe 55-45, pretty close.
Well, that's good, because I saw some tweet that said we had only sold 4,000 of 17 or 4,000 of 12,000 tickets. So
no,
plenty of UCF people there.
On TV, it looked like. Yeah, on TV it looked like they were dressed as empty seats, right? They were.
By the way, it was the lowest attended Fiesta Bowl since '79.
Yeah.
Good job.
Well, that's not a surprise when you have two teams from the East hauling out west.
Don't schedule it at 11 a.m. on New Year's Day. Maybe you'll get more.
That's
people.
true. Yeah. It's 11 a.m.
By the way, I do want to point out because a lot of people are upset at the broadcast for a lot of different reasons, and the reason why the UCF band, a lot of UCF sections weren't shown. From what I was told, the cameras, because there was a lot of empty seats, they very much played it very conservative on the what to show and not to show. If you know what I mean. The last thing they want to show is a bunch of empty seats.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it was the lowest attended Fiesta Bowl, there's pretty darn good reason for that. But
at least we know USF fans travel well.
Empty seats everywhere. Yeah. All right. I will be working on, or at least Eric, you and I will both be working on our continued series on future UCF Hall of Famers, not just in football, but we're going to get to some of the other sports as well. And then also, I'm continuing the work that I'm doing on looking back at the recruiting classes and grading them after their time at UCF. I got through the 2010 ones. Okay, so I want to go back as far as I can. I want to try and see if I can go back to O'Leary's first recruiting class in 04.
What's the first recruiting class on record? Is that 2000?
02, I think. 02 or 03. I forget exactly. At least when I go back in terms of and I look at rivals.com, that's what I look at.
I like your thing where I could actually look up what star I would have been as a recruit. I like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, we put up the little
solid
star ranking. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I like that.
The way I see it is, if you're a 3-star, that means that you should be you should have played and graduated and not much else. And then if you're a 4-star, maybe you were a solid starter.
I like that low bar.
Okay, Chris, how many stars did you have coming out of high school?
Dude, we didn't even have a ranking system when I came out of high school. I walked on from Canada running a 4.53 40 at 6'2", 210.
4.53?
I ran a 4.53 40 at 6'2", 210 as a wide receiver.
Luke Sarris, what do you give that? Solid 3.5 stars?
I would have been about an 85, 86, I think, rating on a 2.47. If I had played in Florida.
5 stars in my book.
See right there. That's team. That's a team player.
Stars don't mean anything.
That's true. My lifetime stats are 2 punt returns for 5 yards. I was the only linebacker. I think I was the only linebacker in college football that actually returned punts.
Or at least the only one that we know returned.
All-Stars again.
Right. Or at least the only linebacker that we know didn't return any punts until Brian Urlacher did. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's wrap this up. Thanks again. We did this a little bit differently because it was the post-bowl game, and I want to thank all of you guys for chiming in with me tonight. Chris Carter, Eric Lopez, Jeremy Brener, and Luke Sarris. Full house today on the podcast, guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Go Knights.
And I want to thank also our buddy Sam Unger for, again, his sponsorship of our podcast. His support has been very valuable all throughout this last 13 months that he's been on board. So I want to thank Sam. And thanks to all of you who've been listening. I know we probably got some new listeners over the past couple weeks with the bowl and getting ready for the bowl game. And I want to appreciate and welcome all the new listeners that we always have. Make sure you follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com. Subscribe to this podcast if you don't already on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com, part of the SB Nation Network. We are UCF's team site on SBNation.com, part of Vox Media. And we also want to make sure that you follow us at Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret and on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. For Chris Carter, Eric Lopez, Jeremy Brener, and Luke Sarris, I'm Jeff Sharon. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.